All right. What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode Podcast Interview. Where every single week I interview top real estate professionals and top entrepreneurs. And today, you guys, we are joined with another rock star, amazing, epic guest. Our guest today, Nikki Miller. Now, Nikki, just to give a quick little backstory before we jump in here, Nikki has been in the real estate industry essentially her whole entire adult life. She quickly created a lot of success as an individual agent, hit a capacity, then had to start going through the decision process and going through the process of creating and building a team, realizing that that's not really what she wanted. And through necessity, her new business was born, which she's the founder and CEO of Lead Syndicated, now levered by Movoto. Really stoked and honored to have Nikki Miller on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me as well. I'm so excited to learn about all the amazing things that you're doing today. You got a lot going on. But before we jump into all those things, I'm always intrigued in our guest journeys that led them here in the first place. So I know that, you jumped into real estate, at the age of 20?
Yeah, I was 20 years old when I started.
Yep. So why, if we run those clocks, why real estate in the first place?
I have such a distinct memory of this, and thank you for asking this. I feel like no one ever asks the why, which I think is such an important question in why anyone does anything. Like the why is always what I want to know. And I wish I had a really beautiful romantic story of getting into real estate, but the real story is that I actually went to school to be a reporter. So I got really lucky and in a sort of like sideways way was able to be a reporter for the NFL. I was a sideline reporter when I was like 18 years old. So what started as an internship turned into a job, and I got to be an NFL reporter. And I thought that was my dream. Like I realized this dream my first year of college. I'm 18 years old, getting to do this, be on the field with a bunch of professional athletes, like get to do this job that most people work, a lifetime to be able to get. And I pretty quickly realized that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I knew that is not what I wanted to do long term. And I can tell you that my big dream and goal, before I could really name that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and a business owner, there's quite literally nothing that was more important to me than having the freedom to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it with who I wanted to do it with. And what I realized as I started to go through my working life in college was like, that means you have to make money, right? Freedom in our world means that you have to have the monetary means to have that freedom. And I made that connection pretty early, and then looked up at what I was doing, and I was like, I don't make any money doing this. And it's going to be a really long runway for me to make any money doing this. And so I'm not going to do this anymore. So I literally was in the library one day, sitting on the floor in the biography section. And I pulled out all these biographies of a bunch of people who had made a lot of money. Because that's what I wanted to go and do. And all of them had a couple things in common. The first was that almost every single one of them was a business owner. And the second was that every one of them had real estate. And that's how they made their money. And so I said, well, what's something I can do where I get to check both of those boxes? And that's how I got into real estate. That's how I chose it.
Yeah. So what year was this?
This was I graduated college in 2011. So the world was still a little bit messy in the world of real estate. And I started in real estate development, but then I got into sales. I had my big goal in life was to become, when I started in real estate development, I started on the finance side. So I was actually an underwriter for a real estate investment and development company. That's the first job I got when I was 20. And in order to make money, this, but for anyone listening, in order to make money in that world, you have to become a partner. Like you have to actually become a partner on those deals. That's how you get to participate in the upside. So that was my big goal in life, was to just become a partner at this firm. And the firm was young enough and I was hungry enough that I would have had the opportunity to do it fairly quickly. So I literally, kid you not, I was working 100-hour weeks consistently every single week. And without fail, working every day on weekends, just so I could hit this big goal. And the literal day that I got offered partnership at this company, I went home that day and I'm psyched, Joshua. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 21 or 22 at the time. I just got offered partnership. My dream is realized. I'm so excited. I get home and my husband, now boyfriend at the time, was like, I got great news. I'm like, I got great news too. Today was the best day ever. And he's like, me too. And I was like, okay, you go first. And he's like, I got a huge promotion and I'm being transferred to Northern California. And I was like, not great news. This is not great news because I just got offered partnership at this firm in LA. And so I decided to go with him. I liked him, so I decided to go with him to Northern California and thought to myself, well, what am I going to do now? Like, I just gave up. My one goal was to become a partner at this firm. I just said no to that to move up here. I'm now unemployed and I have no other plan. And I really didn't want to start over at another investment firm. Like, I knew I'd kind of hit the lotto in terms of timing and how hungry I was to make that work. And I knew it would be a real long runway till I was able to get that type of partnership opportunity again. So I thought, what am I going to do? Like, what's something I can do where I control my own success? And I was already in a tangential real estate, business, and said, well, I'm just going to go straight into real estate sales. I had just gotten my real estate license, and as it goes when you're 22 years old and don't know what you're doing or anything about life. The benefit of that, what I always tell really young people, is that the benefit of that is you also have no concept as to what's possible or not possible, right? And so you're in a way able to create more than someone who's been sort of weighed down by limiting beliefs and challenges over time. And so I'm 22 years old in a brand new area in what at the time and still is today one of the most challenging real estate markets in the country. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go be a real estate agent. It's going to be great. And that's how I got into real estate sales.
Yeah. So is this like in the Bay Area?
Yeah, in the Bay Area.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. So then, so 22 years old, make this big move, get licensed. Now we know the stats, what's at 90% dropout within the first 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
Like, what did you do out of the gate? Walk us through your first year. Like, what did you do to start creating success?
I door knocked. That's how I built my whole business. So I built my whole business door knocking because the challenge was, I remember, and you probably remember this, and everybody does from your early career in real estate. What's the one thing they tell you to do? They're like, oh, reach out to your sphere. I'm like, okay, I'm 22 years old and I'm brand new to this area. So first of all, none of my friends are buying houses. Secondly, I literally don't know anybody here. So I looked up and was like, well, what's the fastest way for me to meet people? And frankly, I wasn't great on the phones, but what I was really great at was being in front of people. I was like, if I can get in front of them, I can show them that I'm the right person for the job. And so I door knocked, and I wish that I had a Cinderella story. Like, I wish I could tell you I was the rookie of the year and I crushed it out the gate. But I didn't. I officially started with the real estate company that I joined in January of 2014. And I went almost 12 months without selling a single house. And I door knocked every single day, 356 days, my first year in real estate, I door knocked 356 days. I literally still have my chart. It's framed in my office. And I didn't sell any houses. But the next year, because of all of the work that I had done, I was the #1 individual agent in my office at 23 years old. And that was how I did it. It was all from door knocking. That was how I built my whole database, that and some open houses. But frankly, most of the business came from door knocking.
So during that year, because I mean, a year is a long time with no results out of something. I mean, most people would have abandoned, would have quit, and most people give up too early. Like, what kept you going? And because that's a massive amount of hustle too with the hard activities. Like, what kept you going when you're yielding zero results?
There's a couple things. I mean, I think the first was that the gift that I've given myself over the course of my life is that I'm a perpetual student. And that started really young. Like, I was a student of business even then. And I remember people throwing around that stat, like that most agents will fail out in their first 3 to 5 years. And the truth is, most businesses in general fail in their first 3 to 5 years. This isn't isolated to just real estate. I always sort of laugh when people give out that stat, because I'm like, this isn't real estate specific. This is business specific. And if you do research on that stat, more often than not, it comes from two things. Number one, the person wasn't willing to fail for long enough, right? i.e., they didn't realize how long it takes to actually be successful in business. So they hear, especially in the world we have now, where in the age of social media, where everybody's giving you their highlight reel, like they just see the end results and think that something's wrong with them because they're not a billionaire in 35 days. Like, it just doesn't work that way. So I had a really clear head about the fact that I was going to have to stick it out if I wanted to see the results. and that the people who were the top agents in our business didn't get there overnight. These were people who had multiple decade-long careers, and were doing the same things over and over and over again. So I think that was the first, that I was really a student of business, and I had a pretty good head on my shoulders around how long success actually took. The second thing is that I was probably, again, too young and stupid to quit. Like, honestly, that was, I just didn't listen to everybody around me who said, no one's going to work with you because you're so young, and no one's going to work with you because you don't have any business here, and no one's going to work with you because of whatever their limiting beliefs were. And I just have sort of always had the attitude in my life of like, watch me. Like, these rules are not real, and these limiting beliefs are not real. Like, there are so many people so consistently proving these things wrong. Just watch me. And by the way, the only way, I mean, the gift I also gave myself and have continuously given myself is sort of like what's the worst thing that happens, right? I made a decision that I was going to give it my best go, and I wanted to be sure that I would fail out. Right? I made a decision that I was going to try this for 2 years. I was going to give it my best effort, a real best effort for 2 years. And if after 2 years I saw 0 results, then I would reassess. Right? I had the ability of, the privilege of being young enough that like I didn't have a whole lot of overhead or people depending upon me. So I had the privilege of being able to fail. And I just looked up and said, well, I'm gonna do this for 2 years. And if I really get no results after 2, maybe I'll reassess then. But I'm gonna actually give this a fair go and find out what happens.
Yep, love it. So okay, so when you're door knocking, is this just like circle prospecting, kind of your okay? So then from there, okay, so then the second year, the compound effect kicks in, boom, things start to explode. At what point did you hit that capacity where you were starting to go down the journey of thinking about building a team?
Yeah, so this is every time I say this, I feel like everybody from another state is like, cry me a damn river, but this is real. I always say in California, we like to talk a lot about volume, right? Because we can do a lot of volume here because of our price point. But the challenge in California is that building systems here from a real estate perspective is actually really hard. There's just not that many teams or people that are doing enough units to really slay systems. Because you can be a top agent. Like, I was the #1 agent in my office my second year in business, and I think I only did like 15 transactions. It wasn't that many. But because of the sort of expectation of what that service looks like here, and because of the number of units that we're used to doing, building out systems here is really challenging. And so I kind of hit, like, I remember I hit, I think it was four-ish, 5-ish transactions at once, right? I was, all this compound interest kicks in, and I hit this sort of 5 at once. And I remember realizing, like, this is my capacity. This is the absolute most that I will ever be able to do by myself without leverage. And so I'm, again, 23 years old. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I go into my manager's office and I'm like, hey, I've hit my ceiling. I can't do any more transactions. And I also realized then, by just paying attention, that this sort of roller coaster that every individual agent goes on is because they get a bunch of business, they operate all this business, they close all this business, and all that time that they've been doing that business, they're not prospecting. So then they close it all, and then they've got to start over, right? And I was someone who was very clear that I was only successful because I was consistently door knocking, because I had door knocked 356 days and was still doing it. And I started to get nervous because I was managing these 5 transactions and I wasn't able to do any more. And I wasn't able to door knock because I was so busy with these 5. So I went into her and I said, hey, like, I've hit my ceiling. This is what's going on. What do I do now? And she said, okay, well, now we're going to teach you how to, we're going to teach you to hire people, and we're going to teach you to manage overhead, and we're going to teach you to build systems and build marketing and do a database and do all of this. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to do any of that. I'm 23. I should not be responsible for anybody, much like I'm barely responsible for myself. What I am great at is selling real estate, and I do not aspire to manage people. Like, it was just not something that I wanted to do. And I was like, I don't want to bring on buyer's agents. I do not prescribe to the build a team model. And she said, well, that's the way it's always been done. That's what you have to do now. And so I like I said, I believed her. Like, I didn't have any other point of reference. So I tried it that way for 6 months and failed miserably. and then went back to her 6 months later and said, hey, thanks so much for the coach and these classes and all of this, but I don't want to do this. Somebody before me has figured this out. I would like to just pay them to do it. And she said, well, you can't do that. That doesn't exist. And I said, well, then what are my other options? She said, well, you can join a team. And this was a long time ago now, right? So like the teams were still in their early iterations, and frankly, were just basically a group of people connected by one person's credit card. Like they were not what a lot of teams are now. And I was like, I don't want to go that route. That's not what I'm looking for. And I said, I definitely don't want to build this myself. So what's my option if I don't want to join a team and don't want to build it myself? And then she sort of smiled at me. She said, then you stay where you are. And all I heard is like, suffer the consequences of staying where you are, right? Because in my world, my entire being is predicated on growth. And here I have someone telling me I have to just stick where I am. And that was my ceiling. And so that's sort of what started this conversation in my head of like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to do this. And at the time, the industry just didn't have one available.
Yep. So this is what, around 2013-ish?
Yep. This is around 2013. Well, yeah, 2013, 14, 15 is all when this is kind of like all going on.
Okay. So then how long was it from hitting that point to then starting the company that you now have today?
Yeah, it didn't happen for a while. Like I suffered in silence for a while. By force, I ended up building it out myself. And I built a fairly successful expansion team through California. Around 2018, I moved back to California, became the CEO of what at the time was the largest brokerage in Southern California, and was still operating my team and running this brokerage. And all the while, to be honest with you, Joshua, I was just not happy. Like I was always clear. I felt like I had all the markers of success in real estate. Like team was doing well. I was making money on it, but I just didn't like it. And I really didn't love running it. And I wasn't feeling passionate about it. And I would get on our calls with our teams and we were going over the same things. And I really couldn't pinpoint why I wasn't excited about it. And eventually I got to the point where I just shut it down. And everybody was like, you're crazy. You have a successful team. Why are you shutting it down? I said, I don't like doing this. This is my feeling around this has not changed from when I was a brand new agent in 2015, 14, 15, struggling by myself. Like, I still don't want to do this. I still don't like this. I still think there's a better way. And around the same time that I made the decision to shut it down, and I was managing this huge brokerage, I also would coach agents who would come in, who were individual agents. They would come in with the exact same symptoms that I had had, right? And I always say everybody hits a ceiling. There's 4 ceilings you can hit in real estate. Number of transactions you're able to sell on your own. And this is either number at any given time or you're just doing the same amount of business year after year after year. Like I always give the example to agents is the average number of transactions that a real estate agent sells who actually makes it in the business. That number has not changed in decades, literal decades. We are still hitting the same ceilings that we've been hitting, right? So you hit your ceiling of transactions and number of transactions, or ceiling of achievement in number of transactions. You hit your ceiling of achievement in money, right? Like even if you're building out a team, I know you see this, I see this, we see people build out these big teams and they're literally netting the same as they did when they were doing it by themselves, right? Or you hit it in time, like i.e. I'm out of time. I'm probably not a great, friend, spouse, parent, whatever it is, because I don't have time for anything except real estate and I'm losing it. And the fourth one is energy. Like that's when you want to quit, right? That's the ceiling of achievement when you hit it and you stay there for long enough that you call it burnout. But really, I just say you've spent far too much time outside of your achievement zone, like your strength zone, right? And so everybody was hitting one of those, but they were all symptomatic of the same challenges that I was facing as an individual agent, which was we're all looking for a better way and we don't want to join a team and we don't want to build it ourselves. And so eventually, this was around like 2020, I had my daughter, and obviously the world was falling apart. And so I was just stuck at home. Like I'm literally stuck at home with this little infant, and business is kind of stopped and the world is kind of stopped. And all I had was time to sit around and think. And I just kept asking myself, like, what is it that I'm looking for? What is it that all these agents are looking for? Because everybody's coming to me with the same problem and the same challenges, and I'm having the same stupid conversations that I was having with my manager 10 years ago. And I looked up and said, I think I got it. Like, I think I got what everybody is asking for. And what everybody wanted was all the economies of scale, all the benefits, all the infrastructure of having a team around them. But they didn't want to give up their brand and production under an actual team. And alternatively, they didn't want to take on a bunch of overhead and they didn't want to manage it themselves. And historically, when we asked the industry, is that possible? The industry said, no, you can't do that. That's not available to you. And so that's what I went out and built. And I first launched it in January of 2021. That was when I first started going out to agents and talking about what this was, and brokerages and talking about what this was. And I remember I ran it by a lot of my friends, probably a lot of our mutual friends in the real estate industry. And I was like, hey, I got this idea. I think it's pretty cool and I think it's going to work. And this is what it does. And this is how it works. And by the way, I'm going to specifically design it for individual real estate agents. And I kid you not, when I say that there was not one person, literally not one, people that were longtime mentors of mine, friends and mentors and people that I really respected and looked up to. Not one of them was like, yeah, this is a good idea. You should go do that. Every single one of them was like, don't do it. You're an idiot. You've made a lot of good decisions, Nikki. This is not one of them. Nobody builds things for individual agents for a reason. And nobody builds things that are this operationally heavy for a reason. And there's no way you're ever going to be able to scale this. This is a bad idea. Don't do it. And so sort of with the same attitude I had when I was building the real estate business, I just said, well, there's only one way to find out. Only one way to know if it's really going to work or not. So I've officially launched it in January of 2021 against the advice of literally everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the cool thing though is, you have the sample size from your own experience in running the brokerage and, but you're also somebody that's just made bold decisions to chase what you feels right. And okay. So then from there, okay, you launch. Now walk us through then, just so everybody that's watching and listening has an understanding of what it is that you do. So you support individual agents and you provide a kind of a menu of service items to help them scale so they don't have to go play HR. They don't have to take on all the exposure and the risk. But what does that look like? I'm sure version 1 wasn't what it is today.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah. So
much better today.
Yeah. what does it look like today?
Well, yes, I'll explain what it looks like today, but I always go back to, I sort of laugh. There's that, I don't know who said it and I'm probably going to botch it, but there's a great quote by a very famous entrepreneur that's some version of you should be embarrassed by your first iteration of whatever you launched. And I am humiliated by the first thing that we launched. That said, what we got right was the idea of what we do, which was already what I explained before, which is just selfishly what I wanted. I built what I wish I had, which was all the economies of scale, support, benefits, infrastructure of having a big team around you. But I didn't want to give up my brand. I didn't want to be on a team split. Alternatively, I didn't want to play HR, to your point, and I didn't want to build it myself or be responsible for the people. And I didn't want to take on the overhead. That's the biggest one that we see, that most agents will resist building out leverage for themselves because they don't want to take on a bunch of overhead, because it understandably scares them to take on that overhead when they're in an unpredictable business. And historically, it doesn't go so well when you go to your assistant and say, I don't want to pay you this month because I didn't get paid this month, right? You're still responsible for that overhead, whether you're doing well or not. And so I wanted to build an environment where we could partner with the agent, where we don't succeed unless they succeed. And yet it wasn't a team environment. So they got to keep their brand, because that was one of the biggest aversions that people had from joining teams, is they wanted to take credit for the business that they had built, right? And I understand that, because most of them got into the real estate business so they could build something of their own. And so we said, well, let's empower them to be able to do that at a higher level. And let's also protect them from the downside, protect them from having to build it, protect them from having to slow down to figure all of that out, and protect them from having to have the overhead. And so what we do isn't so much a menu of services as it is an actual comprehensive model of support. So the big difference between what we do and what a lot of people I think that we do, is what I explained to so many, is that the real estate industry is not in need of any more tools. This industry does not need any more tools. The tool that you need exists out there. What our agents were looking for, even though they might not have been able to articulate it well, they were not looking for another set of tools. They didn't need another dashboard. There wasn't another piece of technology. There was nothing that they needed to add. What they needed was somebody to do it for them. They just didn't need to spend time and energy and thought on figuring out how to put all these pieces together. And that's where most agents unknowingly lose all of their time, is in figuring out how to put all these pieces of support together. because there's plenty of companies that offer elements of what we do, right? The challenge though for the agent is that they still have to put it all together. So what's unique about us is that it's a comprehensive model wherein we support their business in I call it the big five, all of the big five. Like if they come to us and say, well, I just want this or just want that, it's not how it works. It's not a menu. It's comprehensive support. So they get coaching and training, database management, marketing, transaction management, and supplemental lead generation. And so we support them comprehensively in all those areas wherein they get to plug in and they still get credit for all of it. I always tell our agents, like, you get to take the credit, we do the work. That's what we're designed to do.
Yep. Love it. So then when you say that, okay, they don't have to take on the exposure, is this then some element of a partnership or it's a percentage based?
Yep, it's all percentage based because I don't know about you. I think everybody is probably the same in the world of real estate. One of my big challenges was I can't tell you how many things I've paid for in real estate, in the world of real estate, where the company that I paid the money to, the company that sold me the dream, benefited greatly from their sale on me. And I always say really great salespeople are the easiest people to sell, right? Like you can easily sell me on your dream of like, yeah, I trust that this is going to do exactly what you say it's going to do. And I can't tell you how many things I've paid for that were, like I said, a great deal for them, not such a great deal for me. And so when I designed this, I said, well, from an integrity standpoint, I literally would not be able to sleep at night. A business would not be worth owning to me if I didn't know that what we did, that how we got paid was not predicated on what we do working, right? So I never wanted to get paid unless our agents got paid. And I didn't want to succeed unless our agents succeed. So that's why we structure everything on success on purpose.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's a hard lesson that you have to learn, especially as you're building your team. But it's like, as an example, like going through the great financial crisis, because I got in the business 2005 and had a couple crazy, insane years before the market fell off of a cliff. But then from there, okay, I positioned myself with 35 different banks, outsourcers, asset managers. Like I needed this staff. They were amazing staff. We were doing a ton of volume, but because I had to float the banks for all their expenses, right? And it took about 6 months to get reimbursed. Like I remember, dude, I was so freaked out. That was okay, because I quickly became one of the top REO agents in Arizona in the country. But I was so freaked out that I was going to get my own house foreclosed upon, because I was having to do credit card cash advances. And I went like, I don't know, 9 months without a paycheck just to make sure everybody else is getting paid. And I've had a couple different of those seasons where it's like during big market shifts or whatever, where it's like, hey, you've got all this exposure, you got, whatever your nut is on a monthly basis, 30, 50 grand, whatever it is, where these bills, expenses have to be paid. And there's a lot of times that you have to forgo your paycheck.
All the time, right? And I think that that's the part, I think when people hit there is when they so often quit, right? Like they equate success to only the good times. And what I tell people is that every strength, every business, every experience, you've got to flip the coin. And I always say, like, for every great strength that you have will correspond to a great weakness. And for every great time that you have will correspond to a great strength. Well, like the great strength that we have in real estate is that there is literally no ceiling to our income. You can go and build whatever you want. There are literally no rules here. But the great weakness is that there's really no floor either. You will have times like that when you're building something really big where you are foregoing your paycheck. I mean, I can tell you that very intentionally, the company that I built was mine. It was self-funded, it was self-built, and I didn't take money from that business at all because I put every dollar back into it. And there was plenty of times, especially in the beginning, because we only got paid by success, because we were dependent upon it working. And especially in the beginning where I was just shoveling money into this thing that everybody told me wasn't going to work. And there are times, I'm sure you had the same experience, or maybe you got a much stronger countenance than I do, but there was times where I had to look in the mirror and say, like, do you believe in this much? Like, do you actually believe in this big dream? Do you believe in this model? And do you believe in what you're doing this much to be putting this amount of time, effort, and money into it, where you're literally not seeing a return? There is nothing that's coming back. And I don't think I think the reason most people fail isn't because they're not cut out for building a business. It's because they're not cut out for those times. And they think that that is an indication of the fact that they're failing. But I always say failure and success both have so much to do with when you time the outcome, right? Like you look at a person who's in that environment, if they had caught you in just that period of your business life, sure, it might look like you're failing, but wait a couple years for the person who was willing to stick it out through that. And then all of a sudden they're a success. But all that changed was time and how willing they were to take those hard times to get to the other side and how much they believed in what it is that they were building. Right. So I don't think you get one without the other, but most people won't stay there for long enough to get to the other side. Right. Like
Yep.
most people wouldn't do what you were willing to do. Most people will not go 9 months without getting paid.
Yep. 100%. So then, okay. So when we look at like, okay, I mean, because everybody that's watching, listening to this is attached to the real estate industry, individual agent, team leaders, broker owners. So for those that like, I mean, are there certain types of agents that this is for, cause like database management, like I'm sitting there thinking, okay, that's going to, and I don't know if database management encompasses all of lead follow-up, but are there specific niches or specific styles of business operation styles that what you guys do works better for versus others?
For sure. Yeah. We're exclusively and specifically designed for individuals. That's the biggest one, right? That there's literally a Facebook group that bullies me, and I lightly use the word bullying. It's all for fun. But there's a Facebook group of about 50 teams around the country who are trying to get me to do this for teams. I'm like, that's not what we do. Like we specifically serve individual agents. So if you're somebody who has a bunch of buyer's agents around you and you have a big staff, like what we do isn't for you. This is specifically and exclusively for individuals. And I always say we've got like 3 pretty consistent avatars. The first is the individual agent who has just absolutely hit their maximum capacity. Like they've hit their ceiling in whatever that looks like to them, right? I shared the ones I most often see before, but this could look like transactions, income, time, energy, like whatever their ceiling is. And they come to us because they're like, I just need relief. I need relief and I don't actually want to grow. I just want help managing this mess that I've built. We get a lot of those. Second is the agent who comes to us who wants to grow. I mean, we have agents who are quite literally, no exaggeration, growing double, triple, quadruple digit percentages in their businesses year over year by being on our platform, and like directly attributed to being on our platform. So if an agent comes to us and says, I want to grow, we're just a faster way for them to do that, right? We're a much quicker path to success. And then we get a lot of agents who maybe have tried either building a team themselves or have been on a team themselves, and then make the decision that they just want to be an individual, right? Like they just want to be an individual agent. They don't want to deal with the chaos, and they need support in order to do it. We get a lot of those. So those are our 3 biggest ones. Not to say that there's others that don't fit into that, but those are our 3 biggest.
Yeah, I mean, because what's the stat? I don't know if you know this. I don't know if this is true. I heard it years ago, but it was something like 93% of realtors will never be on a team, never join a team, never have a team. Like they just want to go out there and sell homes and do their thing.
Yeah, it's gone down a little bit if that's what it was a couple of years ago, because I watched this really carefully. And because I remember early on when everybody was telling me that this was crazy to do, and I couldn't wrap my head around why they thought it was crazy, because I was like, this is literally the biggest share of agents. Individual agents make up the majority of the real estate business. That said, they also make up usually the biggest challenges of the real estate business because they're not all operating on a specific model. But as I know it right now, based off like the most recent statistics, it's about 80% of agents who are not on a team, will never be on a team, and don't own a team.
Yep. Yeah, and have no desire. I mean, a lot of agents I talk to, I mean, the majority of them, like they just want to go out there and sell and make good money and enjoy life. They don't care to take on all the headaches and what the reasons can be, infinite, if you will, but they just don't have that desire.
Yeah, for sure. And I always like to point out that we were joking about this before we jumped on. I'm like, in effect, I spent my whole career asking how not to run a team. And in effect, I do run a very, very large team now, right? We don't call ourselves that, and that's not what we do. But like in effect, that is what our organization is. It's just a team behind the agent. So there's nothing against teams. Like the teams are I think they were an incredible evolution for the real estate industry, a badly needed evolution for the real estate industry. And I'm grateful for them. And most of my friends in the business run enormous teams. It just never really called to me. And so I understand when agents come to me and say, like, I just don't want that, right? And I think the hard part is that the real estate industry historically, in a lot of companies and in a lot of environments, will say, well, if you don't want that or you don't build that, like your business isn't worthwhile, or you're not successful by the way that we call successful, or you're going to fail. And that's just not true. I mean, I can show literally in my ecosystem hundreds of examples of individual agents who are netting more than some of the biggest teams across the country, and their lives are much simpler.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say, well, this was when I was running a team, but still in production, where my production was still the majority of the revenue. I mean, it took me from when I exited out of production, became a full-time team leader. It took me, I don't know, 7 years to match the income that I was making
I believe
when I was still heavily in production. Now I bought myself back time and, or some other elements, but yeah, I mean, most team leaders make a hell of a lot less money than most people think.
Yeah, it's not a short runway. Like I appreciate you sharing that timeline, because it's just not, it can happen. It just doesn't happen as fast as a lot of people make it sound, right? And I think that's the challenge. I mean, I know you've been to so many of these real estate events too, and I hear the same, where I listen to these people up on stage who have built these big teams, and they're like, yeah, I was home by 5 every day, and it was all perfectly in balance, and I did it within a year. I'm like, you're full of shit. That's so untrue. Like, there's no way. There's just not. And there's so many people who say that they're operating one way, but they're actually not, right? They might say, oh, I'm the team leader, but they're still 100% in production, and that is the majority of their income, right? And not to say that that's a bad model, but I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do I take this team and just be responsible for being CEO and not being in sales anymore? And that takes time, right? You got to see what works. You got to get the right people in place. And sometimes you got to get, more often than not, you're literally an arm's length from the business. Like, you got one person that quits and all of a sudden you're back in the business again. And it just isn't, it's not as simple or as short as a lot of people make it sound.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've experienced all of those. I mean, I remember at one point, like getting introduced. I mean, this was, I don't know, 17, 18 years ago, but I'm getting introduced to go speak on stage, and they're like, oh, Joshua Smith did, I don't know, 1 point, whatever there was at that point, 1.3 million last year in sales. And, it was a really nice introduction, but in my head the whole time as they're introducing me, I'm like, yeah, but what they don't know is I'm 100 grand in credit card debt. I'm broke as hell, but I hadn't figured out how to become a great operator yet. Like, gross revenue was coming in, but I hadn't figured out yet, how to keep my money.
I love that story, Joshua, because I remember, like, this is when I made the active decision that I did not want to own a team. Like, this was my defining, everybody always asks, and I don't share this story that often, but like my defining moment of like, nope, I'm out, this is not for me, was I was at a big mastermind, like a top agent mastermind, where you had to have some, like, up in the millions to even get in the door. I'm in the room and there's this guy, who I will never name, but like this guy who's up on stage, and he's talking about his big business, and they're doing a couple billion in sales, and they're amazing. And literally the whole audience, like, I'm sitting there and I can't even wrap my head around it. And I'm looking at all the other people in the audience, and we're like, how the heck, like, how is this person doing this? This is incredible. And it's the business is so big. I couldn't even conceptualize it at the time. And then after his session or whatever, I walked out to go to the restroom. And if you know me, I'm notoriously bad with directions. I could get lost in like a circle. It's embarrassing. So I got lost. I'm like trying to find the stupid restroom, and I get lost. And I find myself in this like back hallway in this big conference center. And I see this guy who had been up on stage, literally curled in a ball, sobbing into his hands. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I was like, well, I'm like, this is a human being who's clearly having trouble. And so I walk over to him, and I don't know him, right? And in the world of real estate, I was like, I shouldn't even be, at the time, I was like 3 years in, I'm like, I shouldn't even be in the vicinity of this real estate god, right? And so I don't know him personally. And I walk over to him, I'm like, hey, like, is everything okay? Are you all right? Like, do you need anything? And he looks at me, and he's like, tears streaming down his face, and he says, I'm a fraud. And I was like, what? And he goes, I'm just a complete and utter fraud. And I said, I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And he says, I just got off stage talking about this big business. I'm like, I know, I was there. It was amazing. And he was like, yeah. And he's like, what you don't know, and what I didn't talk about up there, is that my house is about to be foreclosed on, and I'm about $500,000 in debt. And I remember sitting back and thinking to myself, like, buddy, I can't help you. Like, I'm going to get you some professional help. I'm going to find you somebody who knows how to deal with whatever this is. Like, I'm not far enough along in life or in business to be any resource to you. But I remember looking at him and thinking to myself, at what cost? Like, that was the first thing that came to mind for me, was at what cost? And I think that when we focus on what we want success to look like on the outside, which is easy to do in the world of real estate, to your point, like that we get named on stage as the top this or the biggest that or whatever most people hear or whatever it is. At what cost will we build that? Because it's actually not that complicated to build a big monster of a real estate business. It's really not. And yet you can do that very unprofitably, very fast. It's easy to do, right? And so I made a decision that day after seeing that. Two decisions came up. Number one, I was like, definitely don't want that. I am not building a team. Like, I felt like it was a universe moment. It was sent to me. I was like, I'm not going that route. I don't want to participate in that. And the second was that I got really cautious about how I compared myself with people. Because in our business, it's easy to look at people's outsides, to look at their production or the number of people they have or whatever it is, and to compare what you're doing to what they're sharing. And you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, or if their business that they're running is even a business at all, like if it's even making them any money at all. And a lot of how I built Lever was predicated on that moment wherein, like, nobody knows it's me. Our entire business is behind the agents. Like that, when I dream of success, I dream of all of my agents walking across the stage and me getting to cheer them on. Everybody is none the wiser that we even exist. That is literally what we're designed to do. I don't want to take credit for it. I never wanted to have the team. I never wanted my name to be on their back and no powered by, none of it. It's their business, their brand, as I believe it should be, right? So that was like a defining moment in that same category where I think this business, it's easy to manufacture success. And not to say that there isn't still success in building something that big, but I think it's really important that you define what success looks like for you.
Yeah, yeah, and you've said it in a different way, but multiple times, you've talked about like making sure you know what you're signing up for and making sure that sacrifice that you're signing up for is worth it. And I'll tell people, like, look, if you want to go build a big team or build brokerage, like you got to make sure that this is your obsession.
Yeah, buckle up.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like you got to be obsess over strategy. You got to become a process and systems freak. You got to become a tracking freak, a numbers freak. You got to master the hiring process. You got to have a high tolerance for risk. Then from there, you got to master the ability to stack on ancillaries. And, I always say that, look, your ability to be a great team leader or brokerage owner has nothing to do with your ability to be a great realtor. They're two totally separate things. And you gotta, again, like if you are not absolutely obsessed and that isn't like what you want most, then you're going to have a very difficult road.
I mean, I think that's the advice, right? Like I get calls all the time where someone's in that sort of in between and they're like, I don't know, Nikki, should I build a team? And that's the question I ask them. I'm like, when you look up 5 years from now, is success building a team? And if I hear any wavering, like, I'm like, the answer is no. If there's any waver, if there's any doubt, then it's just not for you. I can tell you that I think a lot of people ask themselves the wrong question when they quest to build anything, right? Real estate or otherwise. And it's, do I want this end result thing of whatever I'm trying to build, the business, the company, the team, whatever it is. And I always look at, am I willing to take all the shit that comes with it, right? Like, and you were, right? You were the person who looked up and said, I'm willing to take these 9 months of not getting paid. I'm willing to take out these lines of credit because it's not necessarily that thing that I'm after. I'm so passionate about this. I literally don't know what else I would do. And for me, in building a team, that wasn't it. When I built out the lead syndicate and now Lever, like I would have done that, right? I did to an extent do a lot of those things. And I said, well, I'm willing to take on all the hard stuff. I'm willing to take on all the bad times to build this big vision. And I think you have to ask yourself that question, because if you are not willing to take the hard days and you're not willing to take when your team walks out on you, or your staff walks out on you, or the market turns, or business changes, or it gets really hard, like, then you just shouldn't do it. You should go another route, where you are willing to take the challenges, or it can just make peace with the fact that you'll have a ceiling around what you're able to build, because that ceiling stretches with the tolerance that you have for the hard days too.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, look, I used to be morbidly obese, almost 300 pounds. So I've lost, I'm like, okay, I
What?
overcome obesity, lost over 100 pounds. I've overcome depression. I've overcome alcoholism. But I'm like, hands down, by far, none of those were nearly as difficult as building a business.
For those that aren't like watching on screen, I'm looking at your muscles like bulge, and I literally cannot wrap my head around you being morbidly obese. It's like literally not something that my brain is processing right now.
Yeah, it's been a crazy journey. But to put it into context, it's just like, dude, I don't know. Have you ever heard of Black Rifle Coffee Company?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm listening to one of the founders, one of the owners, who's a Green Beret, before starting that company. And I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, but he was talking about, he's like, dude, building a business has been so much more difficult than being a Green Beret.
Yeah,
And I'm like, yeah, you think like going into special ops, going to war, like that would be like the most challenging, crazy thing. But he's like, nope, dude, building a business has been way more challenging.
Yeah, it sucks. Like I tell people all the time, I think everyone has again, you got to flip the coin and decide if you're cool with the other side, because I always laugh when someone's like, I'm part of a charity. I'm the chairman of the board of a charity that works with young entrepreneurs. Like, we teach them life skills, financial skills, business building skills. And almost every single one of them says, like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be the CEO, right? Like, that's the sexy thing that I could go and be. I'm like, you want to know what you're signing up for? Because I'm like, I like, being the CEO is the worst job in the world. Like, I tell people all the time, like, this is the worst job you could ever sign up for. By the way, like, you don't take credit unless you're an asshole. Like, you don't take credit for it if it's going well. Like, you give your team credit, but you have to take credit for it when it's not going well. So you get the worst part of that job. Secondly, you know what I do all day? I deal with all the problems nobody can solve. Like, that's my job. I have the most amazing, capable, smart individuals around me building this incredibly like operationally heavy and challenging business, and they are so smart and so savvy. And if they can't figure it out, that's what gets to me. Like, the biggest problems, the biggest challenges, that's what I do every day. I deal with all of that. That's my job. And then I get to take credit for everything that goes really badly. Like, all the bad decisions are mine, right? And then I don't take any credit when it goes well, because you got to give that to your team, because it's because of them anyway. Like, that's the job. Is that what you would have signed up for? Like, that's the job that you want? Because I'm telling you, it's not as glamorous as you think it is.
Yep, 100%. So a couple more questions about levers. So then, okay, is it, and I'm just thinking of questions that those that are maybe watching or listening might have. Like, okay, when you talk about database management, like, is it database specific? Maybe you have an agent that's been doing this 15 years. They have their CRM that they love. They have a big book of business in there. They want to keep you are your people trained on their CRMs of how to go out there and manage these? Or do we got to plug into your stuff that you have internally?
Great question. As much as humanly possible, we don't want to interrupt what is already working for the agent. And almost all of our systems are predicated on that idea. So we use their database, whatever their database may be. So we use their database, but then we use it under our sort of system, so to speak. And where it's all created is this idea that a lot of people will accuse that agents don't do well because they're not good at lead generating. And I've found that that's fundamentally untrue, at least in our organization. Our agents are great at lead generating for the first 30 or 60 days after they meet somebody. Like, they're exceptional for the first 30 to 60 days. What they do not excel at, however, is, like, we track all of this long term and we have access to everybody's stuff. So we see it and we can show it to them. What most agents do not excel at is that over a year, it usually takes from the time that you enter somebody into the CRM to the time that they convert or transact, right? That's where most agents fall by the wayside. And so what we support them in, as opposed to them trying to remember it all or build their own system, which almost never happens, they use our system, our sort of labeling system. And depending upon how they label that person, they're set on a proprietary set of touches that we send out to get them to conversion, to keep our agent in front of them, for whether it's for the next year or whether it's for the next 10 years. So their conversion all of a sudden goes up to these astronomical rates. And it's because we're continuously keeping them in front of people that they otherwise would not be, because they're just one person, right? We get people who have these huge databases. I mean, it doesn't really matter the size, but we'll get some people who have databases of like 4,000 or 5,000 people. They've been in the business a long time, and they're all 4,000 or 5,000 are real. Like, they never bought a list anywhere. It's real people they've accumulated over time. One person cannot be in front of all those people. It literally doesn't matter how consistent you're doing your calls. You will never be in front of all those people. So you have to have something that's built to keep you in front of them, but not all touch systems are created the same. It has to be curated for whoever that person is. Like, how you're going to communicate with a door knocking lead is different than open house, which is different than cold internet, which is different than a sphere of influence, which is different than a past client, right? They all need different communication. And so we provide that on behalf of the agent. Again, consumer doesn't know that it's us, but we're making it look like it's the agent staying in front of them.
Yep. Yep. Love it. And then what about like when it comes to transaction management? Because every state's different. And then it's like, okay, like I've got my 58-point contract to close protocol. Like maybe they want things done a certain way.
Yeah.
Same kind of similar thing there.
Yeah, similar. So we have local TCs in every single market. I learned from a lot of the people who had challenges with this, who I had seen expand before me, where they would try to like centralize their TC services, and it was garbage. Like, there's always a problem. And I very much understand it, because I've worked in both Northern and Southern California as a great example, where they're the same state, but they couldn't be more different. Like, literally how they do the actual contracts are different. And it's all the same state. So we have to have somebody who's localized, who understands that agent's local market. So the agent doesn't have to think about or worry about whether they're protected or their client's protected or not. So we manage that piece, but then they basically have an assistant during the transaction as well. So we're like helping them to schedule signs in the yard. We're scheduling and paying for photos and postcards, and scheduling inspections, and putting the clients on post-close plans, and getting reviews for them, and all the things that the agent should be doing as best practices, but they don't, or the things that are taking up time. And then the importance for us of it being the comprehensive support, where we support them in all the different areas, is what we explain to agents is like, listen, you could go and get a TC in this example, right? But the challenge is, if you get a TC, and even if you have a company that does your marketing, even if you have a database that you have, well, you are the one who's responsible for when you get a transaction. You got to tell the marketing team what to do. You got to come up with the verbiage. You got to tell the TC you have a transaction. You have to get this stuff sent out to your database. You got to put it on social media. Like, you are still responsible for the execution of all of these things. Whereas with our agents, they get a transaction at 123 Main Street, they give it to our team, and they're done. Like, that's literally all they have to do. All they have to continue to do after that point is communicate with the client.
Yep. Yep. And this is just a percentage of the commission. So you guys are essentially getting paid like what, on a referral fee kind of basis?
Yeah, basically a referral fee on the back end that tiers with them as they succeed. So it's all designed to also scale with them, because most of the agents that come to us, even if they start out as someone who's like, I just need relief, I don't want to do any more business, by way of being on our platform, they often will do additional business. And so what we built is a tiered system for them, where they're not being penalized if they end up literally 1,000xing their business with us, or being up 1,000% in closed transactions, because we wanted to make sure that they would be able to have sustainability for the long term with our platform.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's different, market to market, but it's like in my market here in Phoenix, we've calculated what's about 10 hours on average contract to close,
Yeah.
right? So then from there, okay, if you're popping 3 deals a month, well, that's 30 hours every month of your time on, essential, but non-money making activities.
100%.
Where you give me 30 hours to focus on money making activities, I can put another 2 deals on the board.
Exactly. And that's the challenge, is like, okay, that's just 30 hours in your transactions. That doesn't include, like, if you actually built a great system to let people know that you have transactions, like get it out to your database. That doesn't include, if you're busy at these inspections, any touches being able to go out. That doesn't include any marketing that you have to do. Like, all of that is just the transaction, nothing else. And so what we help agents to understand is, like, a lot of them will come to us and bring their P&L and say, well, where are you going to save me money? I'm like, well, we'll go through that. But what you're also missing is exactly what you just said. Even if you get pieces of support, there's still all these things that you are doing during the transaction and otherwise that you don't have to do if you have all of this support around you, that you don't even have to think about if you have all this support around you. And that, I think, is what most people miss in their businesses, that they don't account for that time, which is money, in multiple ways in their world.
Yep. So then, so I got a few more questions for you, but yeah, and I'll make sure for anybody watching or listening, I'm going to have, Nikki's information, website to go check this out. But if somebody's watching or listening to this and they want to learn more about what you guys do and if you guys are right fit for each other, what's the best place to do that at?
I would just go to our website, lever.movoto.com. And Movoto is Movoto. Or you can connect with me on Instagram. Like I like to learn what people are using and what they like and what questions they have. You can find me on Instagram at the Nikki Miller. And, I always sort of laugh. People get on like our interviews or get on our info sessions and I'm there and they're like, it's you. I'm like, yeah, I work here. Like I run this thing. And the way that we've been able to build what we have is because I am in front of all of our agents. Like I am intimately involved in their businesses and what's working and not working. And when I hear people's questions on how things work, it's also an indicator of what people need in the world of real estate. So I like when people send that stuff to me, or when they, if they got an aha out of this or whatever, if they're using something they learned. I love hearing that.
Yep. Love it. So then, is there anybody that you're not for? Like, I mean, outside of obviously individual agents, but like if somebody's part-time or maybe they're brand new, or maybe they're not, maybe they're, only did 3 deals in the last 12 months. And they're like, well, I just don't know if I'm quite there yet. Is there anybody that, like, is there a certain level where it makes most sense for you guys to work together?
Yeah, we don't take brand new agents. Like if you don't have a database going and if you're brand new, it's almost too much support, right? Like it's almost too much around you and you won't be able to leverage it as well as an agent who has some experience, who understands sort of some of the basics of conversion, who has a database going already. So we typically don't take somebody who's brand new, and we typically won't take somebody who's part-time, because the challenge there is part of the reason that Ojo and Movoto purchased the lead syndicate was because we could create this more direct connection to the consumer, because all of our agents, because of the support that they have around them, is that they've got much higher conversion rates, much higher success rates with clients in terms of like what the actual experience is. And so the challenge for us is that if you're not available, if you're literally at another job, we literally can't give you leads. We can't, and when people are being woken up in your database or when we're trying to transfer business to you, we can't because you're somewhere else. And so we've tried it before and it didn't work well, because there was a whole period of time that all the work that we were doing, the agent couldn't use or couldn't facilitate, right?
Yep. And I'm sure too, like you guys are running a business, like you got to make sure that this, you got to remove a little bit of element of risk on your guys' side too.
Well, I'm pretty clear with the agents. Like I'm not shy ever about saying when an agent joins us, there's never like a sign up here. Like you can't go to our website and sign up. It doesn't work that way. You have to go through an interview process because we're partnering with you as much as you're partnering with us. And the way I explain it is sometimes the sort of context I'll give to people on teams, right? Because sometimes people come to me from a team or that are on a team. And I'll get like, I'll hear them give a little bit of attitude, right? Where they're like, well, I don't want to give up 50% to my team leader. I'm like, actually, let's help you understand what's actually happening here. Your team leader is giving up 50% to you, because if they were to close this transaction, they would make 100% of this income. They're giving up 50% by way of giving you this deal. And by the way, they're also taking on all the overhead, all the risk, all of it, while you just get to facilitate this transaction. So make no mistake, you are not giving up 50%, they are giving up 50%. And so under that same sort of guise, we're pretty clear with our agents that this is truly a partnership. If the agent doesn't do their part, what we do still works. And yet if the agent can't close the transaction, if the agent can literally not pick up the phone when I send them a lead, then we can't afford to participate in their business, because I have staff and overhead and risk. And just like I said at the beginning, it doesn't work too well when you go to your admin and say, we didn't close any deals this month, therefore you can't get paid. So like we still have a business and overhead that we're responsible for. And we want to make sure that the people that we're utilizing those resources for are people who are appreciative of it, who want to grow, who want to use it, and who are going to show up for their business just like we do.
Yep. Okay. So going back to you as the founder and CEO. So you launched this company January of 2021. Then some gnarly things happened in our industry in 2022.
Yeah.
And it's been a crazy last couple of years. I mean, you probably heard the stats, 49% of realtors closed 1 or less transactions last year. What have been some of those challenges that you've had to overcome to be able to continue to sustain the growth that you have over these last couple of years?
Oh my God, Joshua, shall we start chronologically or alphabetically? There's been so many. that said, I'll say that the challenges, I mean, I'll get into some industry specific ones, but I'll say the challenges almost always come back to us, right? Like my biggest challenge over the course of the last few years has been me and evolving to the person that I needed to evolve to, the leader that I needed to evolve to be able to make a business like this function. You know, I'm very candid that in the world of real estate, in the world of business, like I'm still, you know, I'm still learning and will perpetually be learning, but I'm still learning and had to accelerate that learning massively over the course of the last few years. Because I didn't really have a yellow brick road to follow. There was nobody who had done this before. I was literally making it all up as I went. And also operationalizing and expanding something really fast that was just really complex. And so the majority of the challenges I've had have been, you know, in between my ears and have been how I needed to evolve as a human being and as a leader in order to show up as best as I could for my team, for my agents, for the staff, for everybody. So those have been the biggest ones. But I would say from an industry perspective, I think I'll go inside the industry and then outside for a second. I think inside the industry, the biggest challenge has been helping agents to understand what's happening in their business when they're typically not inspecting it. Because I look up at what we do, and from an individual agent's perspective, it's a no-brainer. Like, I literally don't understand why anybody would go about it on their own if they have access to something like what we do. I can't conceptualize that. I'm biased, of course, but like I don't understand that. But as I've gotten to know agents and I've done thousands of one-on-ones, I've come to realize that they literally don't know what's going on in their business. Like, it doesn't make sense to them, not only because they've never done it before, but because they don't know what's actually happening as of today in their business. They don't have a system, or they don't understand how it works. And so they don't understand how having something like this around them could make their life easier and better and help them excel, right? So that's been, I would say, like the biggest challenge is helping people to see that which they have not seen before at scale. That's really hard to do. And otherwise takes a bunch of one-on-ones, which are just time consuming, right? It's not as fast a path to growth as it could be. And from an industry perspective, you know, like we talked about it a little bit before this, and I probably get this question at least once a day on a podcast or stage or whatever it is. And everybody wants to talk about the NAR, lawsuit. And my perspective on it and my opinion on it has been the same for everybody. And every time somebody asks me is like, without sounding flippant, because I do think it's really serious, like, I don't really have an opinion on it. And the reason I say that is because we as agents were never promised that things wouldn't change. Like, that was just never a contract that any of us signed. And it was us that made the promise to the consumer, to the industry, that we would adapt and we would change and we would serve the industry, the consumers, in order to in our highest and best use. And it was us that made the promise, not the other way around. And so whether the rules change in terms of how we facilitate that, like, doesn't really matter to me, because we can rage against it or we can have really strong opinions on it, but like, heads up, everybody, it's changing. Whether we like it or not, it's coming. And I look up at a change that's being made wherein we have to provide, from my perspective, better service and more transparency and more clarity to the consumer. And like, you're just gonna have a hard time convincing me that that's a bad thing. And I also think that it's going to require more professionalism and more transparency and more conversation amongst agents. And I think that's a good thing. So I think the big challenge in our industry and what we're seeing is, like, here's the example I give to my agents. I was on a really big national panel, and this was the hot topic, right? This is what everybody wanted to talk about. And I said, how many people are aware that Apple just settled a $500 million lawsuit? And like maybe one or two hands in a room of like a couple thousand popped up. And I said, interesting, right? Because for us, that's all we're focused on. And I said, here's what's interesting. Apple moved forward with their business. And you didn't see every Apple employee getting on social media and whining about this lawsuit that just got brought down on them. They just went back to work. and did what they knew they needed to do in order to move the company forward. And that's going to be the responsibility of real estate agents too. Like, you can whine about it, you can rage against it, you can have very strong opinions on it, and literally no one cares. The industry does not care. You will still need to show up to work the same way, and you're going to need to facilitate transactions a little bit differently. And that's what changed. Like, that's what's happening in the real estate industry. And it doesn't matter what your opinion is on it. Like, it's happening whether you like it or not. And so you have a choice. You get to decide. And I always say that fear and faith both require that we believe in something that we don't see. And so I just choose to have faith that this is going to be the best thing for the consumer and for the industry. And I think that, like, we'll get to decide that at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, because it's, I look at, okay, we've got a multitude of different things going on. I mean, you've got, the NAR, which, NAR stuff, whatever, I'm in the same alignment with you. Look, change is always something that always has taken place, always is taking place, always will take place. So why have resistance to something that is?
yeah.
Now then with the DOJ's separate lawsuit that they've opened, 3 weeks afterwards, we'll see how that shakes out. But, I've got coaching clients in countries like New Zealand that set up how the DOJ really wants it here. And look, they kick ass, they murder it, done in a slightly different way. So, to me, it's like, for those that are committed, always going to go out there and create success.
Always.
And then you got the, just the unaffordability crisis, I guess, right now of what's going on. And then with the overall explosion and exponential growth of technology, AI, and I boil it down to, and I'll get your opinion on this, but boil it down to three things where it's just, and I'll just, to simplify it, boil it down to two things. Like I tell agents right now, and team leaders and broker owners, because it's insane the amount of team leaders and broker owners that I speak to that are also not running their business as a business. But number one, I'm like, look, you got to be a great operator. You got to treat your business as a business. No longer can you wing it.
Yep.
And how do the red flags that I always look at if somebody's winging it? Okay, you're not tracking your important essential KPIs inside your business. Or if you're showing up to the office and you're like, okay, what am I going to do today?
Yeah,
like,
what do I do today?
What you need to do to win each and every single day, and then from there, playing strategic offense. And this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm seeing so many agents' businesses down is they got so accustomed to that 2012 to middle 2022 easy street, where it's like you kind of show up, kind of work hard, kind of be consistent, and just deals fall in your lap. And, but now you can't just wait for things to come to you. You got to play strategic offense, where strategic meaning, okay, I'm going to identify those that have the highest probability of needing my services in this marketplace. And then offense meaning like what's in my full control that I can take intentional action on to put deals together each and every day.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit it spot on. Like these best practices need to happen, right? So the agents that resist them, or the agents that have challenges with them, you can keep doing that. But either way, business rules dictate these things need to happen in order for you to succeed, right? So you're right. We've had a great market the last decade where like you could sort of show up a little bit and like do some lead gen here and there, and like you would probably still be fairly successful. Like you'd still win a little bit. That world changed. And now we see a lot of agents who are receiving the compound interest of the work that they didn't do and are upset that their businesses aren't where they need to be or where they want them to be or where they should be. And I look up and say, well, like, what did you think was going to happen? These things still need to happen. The business rules aren't changing. And by the way, the rules that we see in the world of real estate are the same business rules all around, right? If you want to sell more widgets, you got to go talk to more people about selling more widgets. Like business is simple. And if you don't do it, you're not going to hit your widget sales goal. Like that's it. End of story. And yes, you're right. You got to operationalize and systematize to make sure the experience of said widget is great and blah, blah, blah. But like still, you won't even get to do that if you don't talk to people about buying your widget. Like you have to go out there and go and do that. It's fairly simple. You can resist it and you can fight against it and you can whine about it. But that's still the rules at the end of the day. And I don't think, despite anything that may happen in the future with how agents get compensated, how the process works, that those will continue to be the rules. Like that's not going to change ever. It doesn't really matter what comes of some of these discussions. And so ultimately, if I'm an agent looking up right now and asking myself, how do I go succeed? Well, you're going to have to go talk to more people about selling real estate more often. Like that's how you do it. That's how you go and close more transactions.
Yep. 100%. Couldn't agree more. I know we're going long on time here, Nikki, and I truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here. This has been a lot of fun and a huge honor, my friend.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, 100%. Those watching and listening, again, right below wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening to this, I'll have all Nikki's contact information, her Instagram handle, links to her website, so you can go out there and explore that and see if that's a fit for you. I truly appreciate you guys watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. Peace.